He wrote to me. I really felt like he understood the book and the characters and wanted to do the subject matter justice. And so it felt right giving it to him. And yeah, so I think he did a great job. I wasn't super involved. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to take any credit. I was on set for about 1 to 2 weeks. I think in the beginning, they put a lot of emphasis on Blake's wardrobe and the ages of the characters. And that created a lot of online chatter.
What if I told you that the biggest piece of evidence in the Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni saga isn't sitting in some court docket or unsealed legal document? What if I told you that I found it sitting on a bookstore shelf over the weekend? Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you all had an amazing weekend. Mine was interesting, to say the least, because I spent it with my nose buried in Colleen Hoover's brand new release, Woman Down. And honestly, I am still processing what I found in those pages. Now, before we dive in, let me set the scene for you. We've all been following this legal back and forth between Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. We've seen the text messages, we've read the statements, we've watched the PR war play out in real time. But here's what I realized this weekend. While everyone was focused on the leaks from Leslie Sloan, there was actually another person quietly working behind the scenes to shape the narrative around this film and its director. That person was Colleen Hoover herself. And here's where it gets really interesting. Colleen has spent years building an empire in what the literary world calls romantic suspense or romantic thrillers. It's a genre that often walks a fine line, exploring complicated relationships and difficult dynamics. And honestly, she's faced so much criticism over the years because readers pick up her books expecting one thing and end up getting something completely different. They dive in thinking they're getting a sweet romance, and instead they spend 300 pages navigating the complexities of a deeply toxic relationship. The backlash against her has been building for a while now. Back in 2022 and 2023, even while her books were flying off the shelves, people started digging deeper into who she was and what she represented. There were things in her personal life that made people uncomfortable. There was frustration about how her books were being marketed to audiences who maybe weren't prepared for the content. The criticism got loud. Really loud. Her books started getting removed from school libraries. And look, I know book banning is a complicated topic, but this wasn't about censorship in the traditional sense. These were middle schools deciding that maybe books dealing with adult themes and complicated relationships shouldn't be sitting on shelves next to textbooks. Parents felt deceived. They felt like young girls were being exposed to relationship dynamics that set a dangerous example about what love should look like. So by the time the It Ends With Us movie exploded onto the scene, Colleen was already dealing with her own share of controversy. And when people started noticing that Justin Baldoni was mysteriously absent from all the publicity, when they noticed that Colleen had gone completely silent on social media, everyone assumed she was just laying low, protecting her peace, staying out of the drama. But after reading Woman Down, I'm not so sure anymore. Let me walk you through what actually happens in this book, because the setup alone should tell you everything you need to know. Colleen Hoover returns to the literary scene with Woman Down, and before you even get to chapter 1, she hits you with a disclaimer. And not just any disclaimer. It's one of those lengthy author's notes where she basically begs readers not to connect the dots between her personal life and the story they're about to read. She says something along the lines of, yes, writers pull from their own experiences, and yes, some themes might mirror aspects of her life, but this is absolutely not a reflection of her journey, her morals, or how she feels about her peers in the industry. She calls it a fun journey that her characters took her on, and nothing more. She literally begs readers not to try making connections between her personal life and the story. Now, I don't know about you, but in my experience, when an author has to put a disclaimer like that at the beginning of a book, it's because there are going to be so many parallels that readers would have to be blind to miss them. It's like when Taylor Swift releases a song and then swears it's not about any specific ex. We all know what's really happening. And sure enough, on the very first page, I nearly dropped my coffee. The main character, Petra Rose, is listening to a podcast, and here's what she hears. It's more than spicy. It's full-on scorched earth. We're talking about Petra Rose today, darling of book clubs and Tumblr mood boards, whose reputation has erupted into literary flames. And if you somehow missed it while you were scrolling your feed, or you don't know breathing, the internet has completely turned on the formerly adored author. And not gently. That phrase, scorched earth, hit me like a truck. Because if you've been following this legal battle at all, you know that in the very beginning, Justin Baldoni's legal team accused Blake Lively's camp of using scorched earth tactics. It's a legal term that describes aggressive litigation strategies designed to intimidate and overwhelm the other side. It's not just fighting hard. It's fighting dirty. It's going beyond ethical boundaries and just burning everything down. And here it was, on page 1 of Colleen Hoover's new book. An author being described as scorched earth. An author whose reputation has gone up in flames. An author the internet has completely turned on. Then the podcast in the book starts talking about why this author got canceled. And listen to this. Apparently, when the movie adaptation of her book came out, someone was missing from the film. The podcast host says, this adaptation had promise and a high budget. It was a majorly hyped-up movie that the studio and author were being very oddly hush-hush about. We weren't even getting cast updates outside of 2 of the main characters. There was zero mention of our beloved character, Caleb. He was nowhere to be found when the trailer dropped. Just poof. And that was enough to almost start a war. When the trailer dropped without a single clip of him in it, but people still showed up for the movie despite the early concerns spreading throughout social media. A character missing from all the promotion. Sound familiar? Now, I sat there trying to figure out if I should take this literally. Is she talking about Atlas being cut down in the film? Or is this a higher-level metaphor about Justin being written out of the publicity? At first, I wanted to believe maybe she was being sympathetic to Justin. Maybe this was her way of saying she trusted the wrong people and she gets it now. But the more I read, the more I realized. No. She's not apologizing. She's doubling down. The book continues with Petra listening to this podcast, and the host keeps digging into the drama. They talk about how the fans were furious. They say, I was Caleb. I was Team Caleb anyway. They cut the entire triangle, restructured the story to make it about Ash and his connection with Elise. And fans were not happy. Not even Team Ash fans, because what the hell were they supposed to do with all the merch the author sold them? Team Ash wasn't even a thing that made sense after the monstrosity of that movie. It made it seem like wearing a Team Ash shirt meant you were not Team Elise, but you were all Team Elise. We were betrayed, Micah. Betrayed. Now, let's connect this to reality for a second. When the It Ends With Us movie came out, there were definitely fans who were upset that Atlas's role got reduced significantly. His adult storyline, his relationship with Lily, all of it felt like this tiny subplot without much explanation. There wasn't enough build-up to explain why these 2 characters still loved each other after all those years. But here's the twist. In the book, the author Petra eventually posts on Instagram to address the drama. She says, Hey besties, that felt so personal. I had no creative control. I was just as shocked as you all are. Does that sound familiar? Because that's almost word for word what Colleen posted in her reader groups. She said she had no control. She was just as shocked as everyone else. And we wanted to believe her. For about 5 seconds. Until the dramatic music kicks in, because in the book, an old text exchange surfaces between Petra and one of the producers. And guess what? Not only did she know about the changes, she actually approved them. She wrote something like, You're right. There's a lot out there about him being unrealistic. I'm fine with that character being cut. Might make it a stronger film with Caleb and the love triangle out. She called it stronger. Stronger. Imagine being part of an entire fandom dedicated to a character, and the author who created them says cutting them out makes the story stronger. Now, here's where it connects to the real controversy. In the actual film adaptation, they had to age up the characters because in the book, Ryle is supposedly a fully established neurosurgeon at 29. In reality, neurosurgery requires about 15 years of training. You don't finish residency and fellowship until you're at least 35 or 36. So the character, as written, just wasn't realistic. They had to change it. And Colleen agreed to those changes. But then she disappeared from social media. In the book, Petra Rose does the same thing. She vanishes. And the story takes this weird turn where she ends up at a cabin trying to write a new book while dealing with massive writer's block. The whole thing felt like a meta treasure hunt. Colleen is basically scattering Easter eggs everywhere, banking on the fact that most of her readers aren't following the legal battle closely enough to catch them. If you don't know the details of the feud, you read this book and think, oh wow, this sounds like what the author went through. But it's not exactly the same. It's close enough to feel familiar, but different enough that she can point to her disclaimer and say, see, I told you this wasn't about me. But the subtext? The subtext is screaming. The biggest criticism that seems to haunt Colleen throughout this book is the idea that she doesn't have the lived experience to write about certain things. And honestly, that mirrors exactly what happened with It Ends With Us. People criticized her for not accurately portraying domestic violence. Doctors and medical professionals did entire breakdowns of how unrealistic the neurosurgeon storyline was. How does this guy have so much free time? Real neurosurgeons work 100 hours a week. The math just didn't math. So, in Woman Down, Colleen creates this whole narrative where the author character decides to fix this problem by immersing herself in method writing. She ends up role-playing with this random guy who shows up at her cabin claiming to be a cop. Spoiler alert, he's not actually a cop. But she uses him to act out scenes from her book, so she can experience what her protagonist is going through. They role-play different scenarios, including one where she gets tied up and nearly assaulted by this guy, all in the name of research. And throughout this process, she talks about how the lines between fantasy and reality are blurring. She can't figure out if her feelings for this guy are real or just part of the roleplay. She can't tell if what's happening between them is genuine connection or just method acting gone too far. This hit me hard because it directly parallels something Blake Lively reportedly struggled with on set. There were questions about whether Justin's intensity was real or performance. But even more than that, it connects to an article from last year that called Justin borderline abusive on set. The article claimed that sources said Justin almost became his character, that some women on set felt he was borderline abusive toward them, that he was unprofessional and unapologetic. The insider alleged that he failed to recognize Blake and Colleen's roles as fellow producers, that he took it personally when they asked for script rewrites, and that his behavior got worse when he felt ganged up on. And here's the key part. The article suggested he might try to blame his actions on being a method actor. Now flip to page 181 of Woman Down. Petra is having an affair with a married man because she needs to understand what her character is going through. She writes, "These writing weeks give me an opportunity to slip out of my own skin and into the skin of someone else entirely. I sometimes get so immersed in my writing, I don't just create the character. I become her. It's like I'm living in two worlds at once. One where I'm Petra, the struggling yet outwardly faithful wife and mother, and another where I'm whichever character I'm writing at the moment, someone who exists only on the pages of my books and is unburdened by consequences. Some call it method writing. There's no such thing. And I suppose I can blame my actions on that. Blame it on the fact that I let myself get too deep into the story this time. I let the characters take over. Let the narrative consume me. And for a while it felt like I wasn't even in control anymore." Method writing. Becoming the character. Losing control. Blaming the art for the choices you made. This is almost word for word the excuse they predicted Justin would use. And here's the thing that really got me. That quote about method acting didn't come from Leslie Sloan. It didn't come from the official leaks. When you look at the notes from James Buca about what happened on set, Leslie actually said Justin's acting was amazing. She praised him. So where did the borderline abusive and method actor excuse narratives come from? They came from Colleen. In the court documents, there are texts where James tells Melissa Nathan, "Please tell Leslie to not tell Colleen I spoke to Colleen. I swore on my life, and I also told her to never say we spoke. I'm extremely worried about this. Should have never said her name. I told her to deny if anyone asks if she spoke." Melissa responds, "I promise." Then James shares other information he dug up on his own. And before he even mentions Leslie again, he says, "Also to Leslie that I dug around on my own and got information after I talked to her." So James spoke to Leslie, then went digging independently, and that independent digging led him to Colleen Hoover. Colleen is the one who provided the borderline abusive characterization. Colleen is the one who floated the method acting excuse. Colleen was feeding information to the press while publicly staying silent. And what's the most telling part of her book? Throughout Woman Down, the narrative is all about how Hollywood did her dirty, how producers didn't listen to her, how her fans turned on her unfairly, how she's the victim of an industry that changed her story and readers who don't understand her art. There's very little accountability. It's all trauma dumping and blame shifting. It's your fault, the readers. Your fault, the critics. Your fault, the domestic violence survivors who got mad about the marketing. And yes, your fault, Justin, for writing Ryle out of the film. Because that's really what this comes back to. In her testimony, Colleen made it clear she was upset about how Justin chose to end the movie. He made the call based on feedback from domestic violence shelters to have Lily leave Ryle completely. No co-parenting. No shared custody. No keeping the abuser in the picture. The expert said it would send a terrible message to show a woman staying connected to the man who abused her just because they had a child together. But Colleen's own lived experience, her own history with her father being present in her life, made her see that differently. And beyond that, it threatened the sequel. If Ryle is completely out of the picture, there's no second movie. In Woman Down, she writes about fighting for a character that got cut. She says, Caleb was integral to the original story. I fought for him at first when they mentioned cutting his character. I argued his necessity, but not with the fire I usually have. The truth is, I didn't trust myself enough. I thought the people in Hollywood who have made countless movies knew better than I did. In one of the meetings, someone brought up several negative comments regarding Caleb's character, reading them out loud to the entire table of creatives, and said the character was written poorly in the book, that he couldn't hold up to the gravity of the script, that keeping him could be detrimental to the film. She talks about going home and questioning herself, reading the negative reviews, letting the criticism drown out the praise. And eventually, she caved. She sent that text agreeing to cut the character. But the resentment? The resentment is still there. Blake Lively had a willing participant in all of this. Colleen Hoover, who claims she has no PR team, who texted Ryan Reynolds saying she has no representation, was the one leaking damaging information about Justin, calling him borderline abusive, suggesting he would blame method acting, all while publicly staying silent. And then she has the audacity to write an entire novel about an author who does horrible, damaging things to people and blames it on method writing. The same excuse she fed to the press about Justin. She is still not on his side. Despite any claims that she's apologized or moved on, this book reads like someone who is still angry, still defensive, and still convinced she's the victim. For a woman who once said she would defend this book until the end and now claims she's embarrassed she ever wrote it, you have to ask yourself, what changed? Was it really about her mom? Was it really about her life? Or was it always about proving a point? Colleen Hoover was just as involved in shaping the narrative around Justin Baldoni as anyone else in this saga. And now she's written an entire book filled with Easter eggs about it, hoping her readers won't connect the dots while she plays the victim one more time. So tell me in the comments, after hearing all of this, do you think Woman Down is just fiction, or is Colleen sending a message? Do you think she was right to be upset about the film changes, or should she have trusted the experts? I really want to hear your thoughts on this one. If you made it this far, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps more than you know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button and click the bell so you never miss another deep dive. I've got so much more coming on this story, and trust me, we're only scratching the surface. Thanks so much for watching and for sticking with me through this whole breakdown. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye everyone, and stay safe guys.